And today we have our physiotherapist, Dr. Abhishek Mishra. I'll request him to come and talk a little bit about, his subject and related to healthy living.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Abhishek Mishra. एक बेसिक हम अभी बात करेंगे कि जो कि जर्नल प्रॉब्लम चल रही हैं आज के टाइम पे, जो कि एक 35 की एक बेसिक एज पे हम लोग को स्टार्ट हो जाते हैं कि छोटे मोटे क्रिकेटर साउंड, क्रैक्स टाइप के साउंड हमको फील होने लगते हैं। तो ये हम सोचने लगते हैं कि हमको ये अर्थराइटिस तो नहीं हो गया, क्या ये हमारी कोई चीज़ तो नहीं है, कोई वीकनेस तो नहीं है। दीज आर द बेसिक थिंग विच कम्स इन द बॉडी। ओके, तो जब हम इस तरीके की चीज़ें देखते हैं तो हम परेशान होते हैं। हम ऑर्थोपेडिक सर्जन के पास जाएंगे, पूछेंगे ये सब क्या हो रहा है, जबकि कुछ नहीं होता। 6 तरीके की दवाइयाँ लिख देता है जिसमें हमारा पेन किलर डाल होता है, वो कैल्शियम की गोलियाँ डाल देते हैं, जबकि इसकी कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है। क्या होता है कि जब हम डेली एक्सरसाइज करते हैं, वॉक कर रहे होते हैं, कई सारी चीज़ें कर रहे होते हैं, हम ध्यान नहीं देते कि हम खड़े कैसे हैं, हम बैठे कैसे हैं, हम किस तरीके से अपना काम कर रहे हैं, जबकि उसके कई तरीके के पैटर्न होते हैं, हम ध्यान नहीं दे रहे होते हैं। हमें ये लग रहा होता है कि हम रिलैक्स होकर बैठ जाएंगे और सब सही हो जाएगा, जबकि ये नहीं होता। तो हमें पहली चीज़ तो ये ध्यान देना चाहिए हम किस तरीके से बैठे हैं, पॉस्चर पे ध्यान देना चाहिए। तो ये सारी चीज़ें नहीं आती, पॉस्चर पे ध्यान देंगे, डेली वॉक करेंगे, ठीक है, तो ये सब की चीज़ें नहीं आएंगी पहली चीज़। तो अर्थराइटिस जो है वो एक 35 की एज पे नहीं आता है। ये 2 टाइप का हो सकता है अर्थराइटिस, एक प्राइमरी और सेकेंडरी, जिसमें से एक होता है कि कोई चोट लग गई हमको और उसके बाद हमारा बॉडी का वेट एक साइड को शिफ्ट हो गया और उसके शिफ्ट होने की वजह से हमने दूसरी साइड पे वेट डाल दिया और हमारे को पेन स्टार्ट हो गया, ठीक है। तो उससे बचने के लिए हम क्या करते हैं, एक साइड को वेट डाल के हम चलने लगते हैं तो दूसरा साइड फ्री हो जाएगा। फॉर एग्जांपल मेरे राइट नी में कुछ दिक्कत थी, चोट लगी और मैंने वेट डाल दिया इसके ऊपर, ठीक है, तो मेरा वेट किस तरफ जाना चाहिए, अगर राइट नी में दिक्कत है लेफ्ट साइड पे जाना चाहिए, तो मैं उस तरफ को वेट डाल के चलने लगूंगा। क्या होगा कि हमारी बोन्स के ऊपर एक लेयरिंग होती है जिसको हम लोग बेसिक लेवल पे बोलते हैं जॉइंट के पास कार्टिलेज, ठीक है। ये कवरिंग है, आप ऐसे समझ सकते हैं कि कोई नई चीज आप खरीद के लाए हैं, उसके ऊपर एक पॉलीथीन की लेयर है, प्रोटेक्टिव लेयर है ना, कि कुछ स्क्रैचेस ना आए, तो वो एक लेयरिंग है कार्टिलेज। उस कार्टिलेज में क्या होता है कि जब कंटिन्यूअसली स्ट्रेस पड़ता है तो वो कार्टिलेज ब्रेक होता है, और वो ब्रेक होने के बाद ब्रेक इस तरीके से होता है कि वो पहले तो सॉफ्ट रहता है, सॉफ्ट रहने के बाद जब उस पर कंटिन्यूअसली स्ट्रेस पड़ता है, हीट जनरेट होती है, तो वो ड्राई होकर ब्रेक होने लगता है। तो वो ब्रेक होने के बाद वहाँ पर कुछ पाउडर शेप में आ जाएगा, दोनों जॉइंट के मतलब 2 बोन के बीच में आ जाएगा, और वो हमें पिंचिंग फील होने लगता है, जबकि वो है कुछ नहीं। हम अपनी क्वाड्रिसेप्स और हैमस्ट्रिंग मसल को ट्रेन करेंगे। फॉर एग्जांपल मैं नी की ही बात कर रहा था, क्वाड्रिसेप्स और हैमस्ट्रिंग मसल को ट्रेन करेंगे, कैसे करेंगे, नॉर्मल डेली वॉक करेंगे, एक कोई पोजीशन को अटेन करके काफ़ी देर तक नहीं रखेंगे। 30 मिनट के बाद हमको, हमारी एक बेसिक है कि 30 मिनट के बाद हमको अपनी पोजीशन चेंज करनी होती है। 30 मिनट के बाद क्यों, क्योंकि एक बॉडी पॉस्चर अटेन कर लेती है, उसको ब्रेक करना होता है। तो फॉर एग्जांपल हम बैठे हुए हैं और उसके बाद थोड़ी देर चले गए, फिर आके फिर बैठ गए, या बैठ के एकदम से खड़े हो गए फिर बैठ गए। तो दीज आर द थिंग्स कि हमें कंटिन्यूसली एक चीज़ को मेंटेन करके नहीं रखना है अर्थराइटिस के लिए। अब बात करता हूँ मैं ऑस्टियोपोरोसिस की। वो क्या है कि बोन की वीकनेस हो जाती है। फीमेल्स में ये कॉमन है। क्यों कॉमन है, क्योंकि मेंस्ट्रुअल साइकिल होता है तो हमारा हीमोग्लोबिन कम रहता है, तो जो सारा कैल्शियम एब्जॉर्प्शन है वो हमारे ब्लड में होता है। तो उससे बचने के लिए हम क्या करेंगे कि हमें डेली एक्सरसाइज तो करनी ही करनी है, बेसिक है हमारे लिए। अब कैल्शियम एब्जॉर्प्शन कैसे होता है कि हमारे शोल्डर एक्सपोज होने चाहिए, विटामिन डी बॉडी पे होना चाहिए। कैसे कि अगर हम सुबह हो सके तो 6:30 से 7:30 के बीच में मॉर्निंग में जो हमारी धूप निकलती है उसको हम ले सकते हैं। उसको लेने से क्या होगा, अगर वो शोल्डर एक्सपोज रहेंगे तो वो विटामिन डी हमारी बॉडी में इटसेल्फ बनता है। अगर हमारी बॉडी में फैट है तो उससे जो हमारी धूप है वो रिएक्ट करती है, उससे रिएक्शन होता है और बॉडी में इटसेल्फ बन सकता है। ऐसा नहीं है कि एक एज के बाद वो बनेगा ही, ठीक है। तो कंटिन्यूसली उसको हम यूज़ कर सकते हैं। तो इसके लिए सुबह मॉर्निंग में हमें थोड़ी देर के लिए धूप में बैठना है, तो इस टाइप की चीज़ों से हम बच सकते हैं, ठीक। दूसरी चीज़ एक बात कर सकते हैं कि हमारी बैक पेन क्यों हो रहा है, कि कंटिन्यूसली हमारे पास सेटिंग वाली पोजीशन है या हमारी एक एज हो गई है, अब हम घर पे बैठ के आराम करेंगे, तो पहली चीज हमें कीप मूविंग वाली कंडीशन पर रहना है कि हमें हमेशा काम करते रहना है, कुछ ना कुछ एक्टिविटी करते रहना है। घर में गार्डनिंग कर लेनी है, या फिर कहीं कुछ काम के लिए चले जाना है, या सब्जी लेने ही चले गए फॉर एग्जांपल, ठीक है। तो अपने आप को एक्टिव रखेंगे तो इस टाइप की चीजें नहीं होंगी। पोस्चर सबसे बड़ी चीज है कि हमें पोस्चर किस तरीके से अटेंड करना होता है। तो हमारे क्या है कि स्पाइन का जो कर्वेचर होता है एक टाइप पे, जो हमारी पीठ है जिसको हम लोग काइफोटिक कर्वेचर कहते हैं, लंबर के पास एक लॉर्डोटिक कर्वेचर होता है। तो ये जो पीठ है इस जगह पर सी शेप में ऐसे उभार सा आता है। अगर ये उभार ज्यादा हो जाए तो लंबर स्ट्रेट हो जाती है। तो अगर वो स्ट्रेट हो गई तो अगर हम जैसे बैठेंगे तो उस पर दबाव पड़ेगा ना, तो वो हमारे इंटरवर्टिब्रल डिस्क को दबाने लगता है। तो उससे बचने के लिए क्या करना है कि एक तो हमें बहुत ज्यादा टाइट होकर नहीं रखना है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल हमें पेन हुआ, हमें ये लगा कि दिक्कत हो रही है तो हम बिल्कुल टाइट हो जाते हैं मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम। तो उसको रिलैक्स ही रखना है, ये नहीं कि भैया एकदम से उसको छेड़ दिया। तो पहली चीज उसको हम ध्यान रखेंगे। देन उसके बाद अगर हमें कोई दिक्कत होती है तो पहली चीज बेड पे लेटे, पैरों को फोल्ड किया, दोनों साइड उनको टर्न किया लेफ्ट टू राइट और रिलैक्स हुए, और पैरों को लटका के फिर उसके बाद उठना है। एकदम से जो हम सीधे उठाते हैं ना वो हमारे लंबर पे स्ट्रेस मारता है और शाटिका टाइप की चीजें होंगी, तो उससे बचने के लिए ये चीज कर सकते हैं, ठीक है। अब मैं आपके ऊपर कहूँगा कि अगर आपको कोई क्वेश्चन पूछने हो तो आप पूछ सकते हैं मेरे से।
ये एक सवाल मुझे नहीं पता ये आपके फील्ड में आता है कि नहीं। लेडीज के ये कहते हैं कि मेनोपॉज से पहले कैल्शियम लेना चाहिए, वो एब्जॉर्ब होता है, उसके बाद शायद एब्जॉर्ब होने में मुश्किल पड़ती है। मैम
रीजन सबसे बड़ा ये है कि हमने पहले कैसे ध्यान दिया, कभी हमारे शोल्डर एक्सपोज हुए थे धूप से कि नहीं। तो अगर हमने होने के पहले भी अगर उस चीज़ का ध्यान दिया होता उसके बाद कोई दिक्कत नहीं होती। अगर उस टाइम से हम कंटिन्यूसली धूप ले रहे होते ना तो नहीं होता।
कैल्शियम एब्जॉर्प्शन की बात नहीं करते।
हाँ मैं वही बता रहा हूँ।
बोल रहे कि क्या ये सच है कि मेनोपॉज के बाद कैल्शियम एब्जॉर्प्शन नहीं होता?
नहीं ऐसा कुछ
आई थिंक रेखा जी आपका जो सवाल है वो एक एक्चुअली मेडिकल डॉक्टर दे पाएगा, वो हम विल गेट इट आंसर।
खास शोल्डर्स पहले कहते थे फेस के ऊपर धूप आनी चाहिए।
मैम वैसे तो रीज़न तो ये है कि अकॉर्डिंग टू बुक्स में अगर बात करूँ तो जिस एरिया पे वीकनेस है उस एरिया को धूप से एक्सपोज होना चाहिए। बट शोल्डर इसलिए मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि काफ़ी बड़ा एरिया हो जाता है, हमारा सेंट्रल नर्वस सिस्टम भी उससे इन्वॉल्व हो जाता है, तो थोड़ा सा हमें उस तरफ पे ध्यान देना चाहिए, ठीक है। तो वो हमारे मेंटल पीस के लिए भी हेल्प होता है, हमें भी बॉडी वीकनेस फील होती है दैट टाइम पे, तो इसलिए हम लोग शोल्डर के लिए ज़्यादा फोकस करते हैं। बट अगर मैं डायरेक्टली बात करूँ तो जिस एरिया पे हमें वीकनेस फील हो रही है, पेन फील हो रहा है, उस एरिया को धूप से एक्सपोज करना जरूरी है।
I think what we will do is we are running a little late. Abhishek Mishra is going to be here only, so maybe we can take questions. And if anyone is interested, we will see the department. We have a full pleasure to see the therapy department. We'll be happy to take you around.
Actually, मैं जो सोच रही थी अगर इन्होंने साथ में हमें वो
PowerPoint दे दिया होता. Next
क्या
time.
होता कि भाई
Next time.
ये
What we do, हमारे पास कुछ booklets हैं, leaflets हैं, वो हम share कर सकते हैं आपके साथ. I think वो distribute कर देंगे.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think let's get to the main session. I think you must have also read, I have shared this little introduction that Pooja had shared this introduction actually. Did you know that the most needed quality of our times, compassion, is also the most ingrained in all of us, especially the group that we have here, because I think it's been a way of life for most of us. This is what we hope to explore in the conversation along with Pooja and Swati and all of you today. Pooja is a writer and TED speaker with over 20 years of experience in publishing and media. She was most recently the co-CEO of Chambal Media, home to Khabar Lehriya, India's singularly news and media platform run by marginalized communities of women in the rural North India hinterland. I think it's Bundelkhand mostly, was it? Her books include Red Lipstick, a literary style memoir of celebrity transgender rights activist Lakshmi, Moms Speak, a feminist interrogation of the idea and institution of motherhood in India, explored via lived experiences, and the Book of Compassion, authored with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Kailash Satyarthi. Her writing has found home in several acclaimed publications such as Himal South Asian and the LA Review of Books. Swati is a writer, dancer and culture curator. Her worldview is fueled by her experiences as a features journalist and her academic training in literature, visual arts, cinema and performing arts. Over to both of them.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. I think when it comes to today's talk, I think we were just thinking that we will start talking about the process of working on this book, because compassion, is such an important virtue today. And but at the same time, the amazing thing about the book is that it just opens up what that really means in our daily lives and in the smallest of ways. If we actually go looking, we'll find it everywhere. So that for me was the most amazing quality of this book. And I think I would like to ask Pooja first about just the process, the journey of writing this book. When you started, okay, there's a book on compassion and there's the Dalai Lama and Kailash Satyarthi and there are going to be conversations. And then, how did it actually unravel? Like, what was the journey that you went?
Thank you, Swati, and warm welcome to everyone here. As Sanjay has reminded us, it's a way of life for everyone, so I'm hoping what we can do today is expand what it means and just maybe get into some of the nuances. So when Swati told me this would be her opening question, I was like, wow, this is like everything, because this question has everything. So I'll try and answer that. The journey of the book was completely planned differently. I mean, completely differently from what the journey then became. It was planned as a book in the tradition of a book that had come earlier, which is called The Book of Joy, which I strongly recommend all of you to read, which is essentially a three-way conversation, or rather a conversation with a moderator between His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And the writer, whose name is Douglas Abrams, who also features in the book, is moderating this conversation. So they're essentially like cult transcripts on different themes and what makes joy. And that's how the Book of Compassion was also imagined. Now this was, you'll have to do some time traveling with me, because I know in 2025 it already feels like very long ago, although it was just 5 years ago. But this was February 2020 when this idea kind of, and I said yes and I came on board. And to jog our memory, March 2020 was when the first wave hit the world. So all plans, were completely went for a toss. Everything that was imagined could not materialize in the way it was. So what it was going to be was this a year-long project. Maybe it'll take a year to do the interviews, write it, and do it. I was very excited, but mostly at that kind of a level. But what it became was, we went into this world where the answer to everything was we don't know. Plus there was like a lot of horror that has enveloped all of us at multiple levels. We were all living in fear, in anxiety, all the emotions that constrict our hearts really. And this book was asking me to expand my heart. And I was finding that very, very, very difficult. I was also not in a great place for various other reasons. So what happened was, then what is this book? I was kind of left in the woods then, pretty much alone, to imagine what this book is, because it's not this. So what is this book? So then I kind of went on this journey really, of what is this book, Mani, what is compassion, right? Because like everyone I knew, I understood compassion as this, very noble virtue. It speaks to the goodness in all of us. It's that higher ground, moral ground we can occupy, but at best it was something that, I can aspire to. And especially through the lives and work of someone like His Holiness and Kailash ji, it's the purview of great men. It was like that for me as well, that, this is something that great men do, and it's great, and I can applaud and admire and respect. But it's all from a distance, right? And maybe I can aspire to be compassionate, but maybe on a good day, maybe when things are going right, I'm in a good mood, my daughter's behaving, all those various things that we feel we need to feel compassion. But actually it was so not that. Like when I started the journey, I realized what it really is, how ingrained it is, how we are wired to be this, how we are born with it, and the truth really of compassion. So just like that abstract thing of compassion, even truth has this abstract quality to it, but even that really came home to me, because at that time I think we had to face our truths in the lockdown and with the pandemic, as ugly as they were and as whatever as they were, whether they were our personal truths, our relationships, or just what we had done in life, when the world was pretty much not what we thought it was. So that's where once I understood that the what is something I have to understand, this was happening at multiple levels, because I was experiencing it, and I was also reading about it, and I was also intellectually grappling with it, and I was also trying to write it. So this was kind of all happening together, and I think that's why the book has become what it's become, and lent the structure that it has today. The book has a tripartite structure, which is the what and the why and the how, because that's really how my journey with compassion became. Because once I was kind of not done, but for the purposes of my writing was done with grappling with the what, the next question was why. And as human beings, I think these are the three questions that drive us or urge us and speak to that existential crisis that we face, which again during that time was heightened, if you remember, of why is someone dying and why am I living, or all of those questions that were coming to, I'm sure, all of us. So the why of it, which is that why should I do it? Because that's the other thing, once something becomes a should, you don't want to do it. We all know this, right? We should expose our shoulders to the sunlight, but we probably won't, right? And why is that? It's because we don't understand the benefits of that. Hopefully today we do, and we will imply it. But unless it becomes real for us, we're not going to do it, because it's a very human impulse of what's in it for me. Why should I do this? How does this benefit me? And again, as a mother, as a parent, this is a lived reality. Any shoulds that you're going to impose on your children, they're not going to work. Whereas if you demonstrate ideally how it's beneficial or why it's beneficial, they can, because they speak to that impulse of why, which all of us have. So that's how the why then came about, and then finally the most important, which is how. Because if I'm convinced so far that okay, this is something that helps me, this is what it actually is, this is how it helps me, but then how do I do it? I am not His Holiness, and I am not running a Bal ashram or rehabilitating children. I'm just doing my regular job, or I'm just, whatever, doing something that's not very selfless, maybe in the corporate world, or whatever it is different people are doing. But can I still be compassionate? Yes, because we're wired towards it. So then the how of it, which is how, then I structured the book for the how, which was to me the most important section of the book, because, unless you apply it and unless it becomes part of daily life and practice, there's no point. It's just another book. And the last thing I wanted was it to be a book that's, preachy and, all of that. And again, all credit to also His Holiness and Kailash ji, because they were also very keen on this. From day one, they were very clear that this is not a book about the greatness of compassion. Please make it relatable. Please see what we can do with it. And so that also was, for me like a North Star to kind of follow with my writing.
I thought that it was amazing how, the book, usually when we see a book like this, we think either, there are some genres, literary genres, either it will be a journalistic piece, like it'll be interviews, or it will be a certain kind of, researched non-fiction book, or, it will be a very hands-on, how to do things kind of book. But the most amazing thing about this was that all of those things are there. In some ways it transcends the genres also, which was the need. I think that's the interesting thing. What you're saying is that the content created the form. The content, the actual thing that she found, then she wrote the book according to that and not according to the rules of the genres. And I think compassion is that kind of an emotion also. You can't really slot it in ye hai, ye happy hai, ya sad hai, ya kya hai. You have to go through all the emotions, and only then you will really know the meaning of compassion in that sense. And you have to do it, type of thing. So I thought that was very interesting, and that it was not just going to be these pearls of wisdom, from which we just receive, but we actually see compassion in everything. You know, I think that was quite interesting. But did you think about this, like, you know, should the genre be this, or should it be a literary fiction, or should it be a journalistic, you know, sort of thing? Were you thinking about it?
I wasn't thinking about genre so much. The only thing I was thinking about is, you know, this is the first book I think I wrote that where I was the reader along with the writer and the editor to some extent also. So I think that was kind of the मापदंड बोलते हैं ना हिंदी में, like that was like the thing for me was very important, because since I was also understanding compassion, I was also trying to communicate it to a reader who was also me. It was a bit like that. And then, you know, a little further on the journey, because the book took then 3 years actually, a little over 3 years. It was also something I would apply and see, almost like little experiments in my relationships or at home or even at work, and see like how it plays out. It was always amazing how it played out, which is you know, quick share. But to your question about genre, I never understand them, Swati. Like, you know, even when I read a great piece of non-fiction, it can transport me like the best novel I've ever read, you know. So I understand why it's in that bookshelf which says non-fiction and fiction. But for me, and because maybe I'd had the experience of Mom Speak, which again, you know, was this, I'm told, kind of genre bending thing, because it was in the world of parenting or motherhood, but it was not telling you how to parent or mother, because I don't think you can. I don't think you can. I can't for sure. So it was not that guide, it was not that self-help. Again, it was this mix of kind of thing. So I think because I'd had that experience, I didn't question that so much, you know, that the genre, what is the genre of the book. But I really feel that beyond a point it doesn't matter. Like, a book is a book, and you know, the whole point is, does it shift something in you, or does it provoke you, or does it, you know, that's the point of all art, I feel, including books. So I didn't give it that much thought, but yeah, it is a mix of genres, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it takes a lot of courage to write a book in that way, because you have to always, you're implicated in the process, right? So in some ways, this book and also Mom Speak also is kind of memoir in that sense of yours, right? Like, you are writing as I in the book also, and that is very hard to do. You know, when you're also combining everything and to see it in this interdisciplinary sort of way, where you're also talking about science, you're also talking about, you know, spirituality, you're also talking about parenting in some ways, right? Like, I want to read one part of that, and also applying it in your life and seeing it. So, I mean, that's actually a very difficult way to write a book, and it takes a lot of courage to have, you know, those kind of, to put yourself out like that. You know, to be vulnerable when you're writing the book in that sense. So I thought that was quite stunning, and it was more relatable for me, because I could see that the author is also going through some transformation. She is finding compassion while talking to people or reading or listening about compassion. So that for me was a great moment, you know, for me to connect completely. But yeah, I think I'll just read out a little bit. Where she's talking about this section I really liked about compassion is also self-compassion. So, but she's also talking about the struggle of it in daily life, right? So, she says, but what indeed does kindness towards one's own self imply? What does it even mean? I can recall a million personal episodes as a parent when I regret moments of impatience, distraction and rage, which quickly led me to the dark zones of intense guilt and leave me perturbed, troubled and annoyed at myself. I promise to do better, both by my daughter and myself, and when I don't the next time, I'm even harsher on myself. Writing about it, the viciousness of this cycle is so apparent to me, but in the day-to-day hullabaloo of life and living, meta-awareness is rare, let alone self-compassion. So, I mean, for me, these kind of passages were very important in the telling of this larger sort of, you know, narrative of compassion. And I think the genres, you know, the very interesting thing, I think once we were talking and you said, I wrote it like a biography of compassion. And I thought that was a very interesting way of looking at it. Instead of thinking of it as a biography of a person, you think of the emotion and then you write about it as if it's a person, and where all does this, come together. So, do you want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, I think the implicating myself, again, of course, the experience of mom speak helped. That was the harder challenge, I feel, and I, survived it by putting myself in that book. And with that one, I kind of had to, as a mother, I felt. But for me, being authentic is not just a hashtag or a word or a term. I have to be there. So, for me, it was very clear when I spoke about how I was the writer and the reader and the editor. It was for me very clear that I am going on this journey and hopefully taking people along. So right now I'm kind of taking myself along when I'm starting. So it's really like I'm telling myself what compassion is, why I should think about it, how I can practice it. And similarly, as I'm writing the book, I'm trying to take other people along. So through those experiments that I was trying, or everything else at work that I was doing, or with my daughter, or in my other relationships. So for me, it was very clear that this is a journey I am going on. And so if I'm going on this journey, my own kind of things need to be in it. And which, as I said, I was also like an editor, because there was a lot that I was like, not this, but this, not this, but this. What will speak to? Well, everyone is even when we were thinking about, everyone wants everyone to read their books. So, that kind of a thing of what all one could relate. And there are some notions around parenting or around compassion towards oneself that I felt everyone could relate to. Because that is something that, it's not just me who's harsh on myself. I see it all the time, all around, people being harsh on themselves. So that was one reason for kind of making sure I'm implicated in it. But what was the second part of your question?
I think I was thinking, why did you want to write a biography?
Biography, yeah, right, yeah.
That idea is so interesting to think of the emotion as it's almost personalizing in that sense.
Yeah. Actually, this links to self-compassion, strangely, because that time when I was talking about when I felt like this alone in the woods of what to do, and it was that time in the world. So my second book, Mom Speak, had just come out. So May 2020 is when that book came out, and it came out in a world that I had not imagined that this is the world my book would come out in, and all the plans, best laid plans that man proposes, God disposes, exactly what happened, right? That is not how that book kind of came out as the various grand plans we had, the publishers, myself as well. So I was in a very dark, strange space with my writing, actually, among the other dark spaces that the pandemic and lockdowns were forcing us to be in. And this thing of it being a biography, I remember the moment when I kind of had to walk myself out of these words, because ultimately that's what I needed to do, because you're feeling completely disoriented, overwhelmed, distraught, all of that. And then I knew at some point that I have to do something about this. So nobody's going to come and tell me what to do now with the book. Nobody knows. The answer is we don't know, like I said. So what can I do about it? So I started approaching it as a biography, because like I said, that the what was coming to me, then the why was coming to me. So I was like, okay, so this is now a biography of compassion. Once that was clear to me, things really fell into place. I wrote a long spiel which nobody ever read, was for myself, about what a biography of compassion, what does it mean, like a biography of any living person, as Swati said. So why self-compassion really? So in hindsight, I could see that was me being self-compassionate, because the great thing about self-compassion is that we are the best persons to help ourselves. It's me. If compassion is a recognition of suffering and then doing what I can in my power to alleviate that suffering for someone else, self-compassion is the exact same thing, but for my own self. So to recognize my own suffering and then do what I can in my power to best alleviate it. And which is why self-compassion is the place to start. Because actually I can help myself best, actually, nobody else. So yeah, I think that for me it's linked with that, actually, that it really became that moment of being an act of self-compassion, really, of figuring out that this is a biography and then continuing that journey.
I think it's very interesting that the book was coming up, you were going into the depths of this while the pandemic also went through many phases, right? And I mean, I think it's interesting to talk about now, like after a few years, of course. What do you think, why do you think compassion, I personally feel, this is the need of the hour. This is the most important thing right now that we need to all really, talk about, practice, do everything. But what for you was that perspective of when you started understanding that, why compassion is the need of the hour? And during that whole pandemic thing, when it went peaked and then it sort of troughed and now we just want to behave as if it never happened. So maybe you can...
Yeah, I mean, how much time do we have? I think that once I realized this self-compassion, and that is what I mean, that when you see it alive, that when you see it as this living, tangible thing, then it's worked its magic, then you kind of know it. So it's important to look back and see that. So through these three years, absolutely like you said, it went through all the many phases that it went through. But because I was going on this journey, I was able to see ways of applying it. So as an example with my daughter, so she was 10 when the first lockdown happened, and this was that weird time of online school, and all of that had begun. You start a new grade going to online school, and for me that recognition of her suffering was didn't happen. It happened gradually through this process. So it's like fear was very big. We all felt it. But what does a 10-year-old feel? What is the fear and the anxiety that she feels? To recognize that then as her suffering. So I remember I don't know if we remember these addresses to the nations that the Prime Minister would do almost every other day, and they became like a trope of our lives among the other things we were doing. So I remember the couple of times this happened. After that, I could see my daughter getting visibly anxious when there would be this thing of there is an address today. Because she was like, oh, ab kya bolenge? Like, ab kya karna hai? Like, what's going to happen now? Because she's also dealing with that fear and uncertainty, right? And for me, because I was on this journey, I was able to recognize it. That, you are in your own misery of your book came out like this, whatever. Think of what she is going through, and then how can you kind of alleviate that? So, small things, and because one was very successful, I can share, and the book starts with her FaceTiming her cousin in the US. So that was actually a pandemic hack and a lockdown hack that we came up with, which was to help her, because everyone in the world, the good thing about it was everyone was going through it, right? It was the ultimate equalizer in that way. Nothing could protect you, and also other way to see it is it could liberate you. So, I made her do these little sessions with her cousins and friends around the world, and so they could share and they could talk about what it means, and in their own way they would always start all conversations with how many cases where you're living, what's happening with online school, and and they needed that space, right? And that's not a space that as parents we can provide them. So to understand that A, there is this suffering, so B, how can I be compassionate and help her? So that was like one kind of hack. So I think that was very early on in the time, and then towards the end when the book was kind of ready, you're saying now we want to pretend it never happened, we'd already started forgetting about it, because we don't want to remember that horrific time, but actually the lessons of it is something we should not forget, right? And so there was a lot of pushback I got towards the end of the book about how should we just remove all references to the pandemic, because now the book finally came out last year, 24 July. By then people have forgotten, plus they don't want to remember. So let's just take it out, this little thing. And I fought back saying that, it's like, wo thoda ugly lag raha hai, so let's just make it very pretty. But for me, that's not, again, going back to the authentic thing. For me, it was very important that it does stay in and that it speaks to the journey. And I was hopeful that, this is how it would speak to the reader as well, because everyone did go through it and would be able to relate. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. I also wanted to talk about like how, that thing of Karuna, of how when you were speaking to the Dalai Lama and you were speaking to Kailash ji also, how they actually thought it's not something which is new. Like they actually said, instead of, he interrupted you and said, I would use the word Karuna rather than compassion. And Kailash ji said, Corona mein Karuna ko dhundna hai, So I think that is something we can maybe talk about, because this suffering wala part jo hai, which is like compassion is not only rosy and it comes from that depths of that. And if we can't forget about Corona and all of those things and just say, ki, acha, that never happened, because to be compassionate is to, to feel that Karuna. I think maybe we can talk about Karuna as such, that when you had that conversation with him, what you understood, how it is, the meaning is not just the English word wala meaning.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the Karuna, what's in the book as well, the etymology from the Sanskrit word and the Hindi that we understand, which is Karna. So to do. Right, and that is something that was a revelation to me when I started discovering or experiencing compassion, and it made it so real. The thing about it not being an abstract, it's actually to do, it's actually action, it's actually something very tangible. We do things all the time. So compassion is also that. It is compassion only when there is action involved. Otherwise, it's at the level of empathy or a level below it, sympathy or whatever that. Only when it's prompting you to do something is it compassion. So I think for me that was very, very, very much the eye opener for me. And but this, I'll go back to self-compassion actually, because I feel that that's the best way to start, and even how opens with that it's only when I can start that practicing towards myself can I. So again, when I'm going back to that time and thinking about all the dark places I was in as a writer, or even at work, there was a lot of challenges facing. Then of course I shared a little bit about what was going on as a parent, and so there was a lot happening. And then there is this thing of the perspective, that this is what you're miserable about, people are dying, right? And don't we all do this to ourselves, right? All the time. And while it is very important to have that perspective, if it is adding to your suffering, I feel it's not very useful. And that is also something that I realized as I experienced it. That for me to think that, oh, I should not be miserable about Mom's Peak not getting what I thought it would get, because people are dying, that is it's still my suffering. In fact, I'm adding to that suffering, right? So again, it's that recognition of self-compassion. I realized that first of all, just recognize it that you are feeling miserable about that, because we are pros at denial, right? Like that is what we do on a daily basis, but actually that only adds to our suffering. And it's only when we recognize that, no, this is true. This is also what being authentic means to, first of all, yourself. Only then can you be authentic as anybody else, especially a writer. So, then I think that's what kind of got me through that book and made what His Holiness was saying so real, right? Because otherwise they are just pearls of wisdom that, I know are very nice and how beautiful, but, they don't mean anything to me, or they don't work for me, or they're not part of my life.
I think I'll read out one part in which the interesting thing about the book is also she spoke to a lot of people who are working with the Dalai Lama. So there's Jinpa, who's like, he's the one who has been with him and he translates, so he has actually imbibed. So to understand compassion, it's not just, not just a conversation with the Dalai Lama, but also all the people who have been living it. So one of the quotes from him is in this, we're talking about self-compassion and suffering. Without acknowledging your own situation of suffering and dissatisfaction, it is difficult to feel compassion for others who are suffering, because you are not truly aware of what suffering is. So first one must acknowledge and realize one's own suffering and the aspiration for oneself to be free from it, and then flip it around to arouse compassion for others, feeling determined to free them from suffering. This is how the determination to be free from suffering with regard to oneself is a precursor to compassion for other people's suffering. You need to recognize your suffering and develop a mind to free yourself from it first. So I thought that was such a lovely, because then it's not just that selfless emotion, it starts from yourself. And didn't we all experience that during pandemic, right? Like we had to deal with that. I think that was amazing. But I also think, for just the interesting thing about the book is that you understand compassion as many, many different things, right? Like, so today there are a lot of things like I made a whole list which I could think of, like kindness, empathy, love, happiness, even listening. Just not doing anything but listening to people, because nowadays nobody listens. Active listening is dead. So I felt like so many things were discussed in the book, and all of these things are there. I mean, you've gone through all the, you've discussed everything, the science of it, how being compassionate makes you, those kind of hormones happen in your body which are the same as when you eat chocolate. So compassion and chocolate, and then compassion as in marriage, in love, all of those things. If you're not compassionate, then how do you have a beautiful relationship? So I felt that there were so many qualities that we actually talk about a lot today, which were discussed, and then they all became part of compassion. So I mean, maybe if you just want to talk a little about that.
Yeah, absolutely. First, just because you mentioned Jinpa, and he's such a favorite of mine, in case it's not a fan. But Thupten Jinpa, who is the long time translator of His Holiness, but his own story, which didn't make it to the book, but I can share here, which is that he trained to be a monk and was a monk for many years, and then at some point realized that life is not for him, and he wanted to experience worldly life. And so he went up to His Holiness, because he was part of the inner circle, it still is, and said that to him. And it was His Holiness's compassion, right, that understood that, because in very strict orders that would be an absolute no-no. But His Holiness understood that this is his experience, this is what he is feeling. And he said, yeah, of course you must go. And Jinpa today has children, and he lives in Canada with his wife, and yeah, one of the loveliest people I think I have ever only virtually met. But yeah, so, and he has a beautiful book called A Fearless Heart, which I really recommend everyone reading, because again he talks about how the expanding of the heart that I was talking about, which he talks about. So I just wanted to share that about Jinpa's own story of his experience of compassion. But yeah, to your question about, that's the what I feel that I began from, because even for me, compassion, even before Karuna was on the picture for me, compassion again, right, was this abstract kind of word. And the words that we understood, which were around, in the orbiting compassion, were empathy and kindness and to some extent love, right? So all of this seemed to be interconnected, but I wasn't sure what exactly was happening there. So this was also some of my questions to His Holiness and Kailash, and they both answered it in their own way and beautifully. So of course that's in the book. But again, for me to make it real, it was something that I had to experience. So something as tangible as chocolate, right? I remember stumbling upon that fact and knowing it. Because to me, when I talk about truth, science is very important. Like, I think it's also something that I'm very nerdy. So I think it's also something that I connect with at a very cerebral level. That, the science is telling me that this is how it is. We are wired to be compassionate. It's actually telling us this. So this is the truth, And the other aspect of it, which is that if I am experiencing it, it is the truth, right? This whole talk now around lived experiences and listen to lived experiences. Why is that? It's because that, right? It's because if someone has experienced it, it's automatically natural. It's automatically a truth, right? And negating it will not help. So yeah, I think that for me was very important that those things do come in. And with everyone, this was like my standard question. So I've asked Douglas Abrams as well, because to me these values were not interchangeable, but very much kind of orbiting together. The thing around listening, the thing, what is listening? It's respect, right? Today we don't even accord that basic respect to one another because we're not listening, especially today with our fragmented attentions, right? So just starting from there, and again Jinpa says this beautifully, that sometimes it's just listening, sometimes you can't do anything. Going back to what compassion is about, action, sometimes the action is just listening because the situation is such that you actually really can't do anything. But the listening is an act of compassion. Absolutely, yeah. So yeah.
I can read that part, I've marked it out. Sometimes the situation might not have a solution, and the most compassionate thing to do might be to not do anything. Maybe to just be there. Sometimes it could just be listening that the other person needs.
What is that? You want to share that? Swati and I were talking about the English to English movie. I don't know if you all have seen it. I'm guessing, yeah. And right at the end, that beautiful monologue that Sri Devi has, right, about that respect is what I was looking for, right? And that is also compassion. What is love? Again, this abstract virtue of what is love, and you just cross Valentine's Day and we all see. But at a very basic level, it's respect, it's attention, it's listening, it's compassion, it's empathy, and all of these things. So yeah.
Witnessing each other, definitely.
Do we want to do a time check?
I think another 5 minutes and then we can open it.
Okay. So one of the things that everybody does wonder about, that if compassion is such an important thing in our world, why is it that it's so hard to, we see it so, it's not very evident, it's not really seen. I mean, sometimes we just feel like, in the book there is this interesting discussion about whether it's individualism, because we are now so geared to be individualistic. Apna dekho, and work on yourself, who am I, my selfhood. Is that what's getting in the way of compassion? But there's a very interesting discussion about it as well, which maybe you can, we can talk about that. And but why is it that it's not so evident? Or why is it that, it's the most needed emotion, but we are not talking about it?
I think a lot of it has to do with just a bad understanding or a misunderstanding of compassion, that we expect to see it in certain spaces, and again it's in wholly rarefied spaces, and that we kind of tick and move ahead. We're not looking out for it otherwise, in ourselves or in others, and again going first in ourselves only. So unless we are doing it ourselves or recognizing it in ourselves, there is no way we will see it in the world. So even when we say this about that, why is it that we don't see it? It's because we're not looking for it. It's because we have certain preconceived notions that we are walking around this world in, and so we don't see it. But actually it's not hard. Actually it's the easiest thing. Even now if we all just close our eyes and think about that one moment we did something for someone to help them because they were suffering. It could be something very small. It doesn't have to be something world changing, right? This is how the world changes, the small stuff. So, and if we can just think about how we felt, and there was nothing in it for you, seemingly. You were just doing that for that other person, right? For whatever reason, whatever your motivations were, and how it made you feel. There is no way anybody in this room or in the world will say it did not make them feel good. It made you feel fabulous, something that no thing for sure can make you feel. But only, being in nature, something like that kind of joy is what you get when you actually practice compassion. Towards yourself or towards another. But towards another, I think, is easier for imagination. So I feel it's actually not hard, it's just that we're not looking for it. And the individualistic is, again, I think it's that bad understanding. In the book, I say compassion has bad PR. And I think that's what it is, that's what I mean by it, that we see it as something so noble, and that's what I mean by bad PR. Because we've done it the biggest disservice by thinking of it as something so magical and noble, and so not for me, it's so alienated, so whatever. रोज की धक्का मुक्की में मैं कहाँ compassion practice करूँ is how we feel, but it's actually not that, right? So I think that the thing about individualism is that Jinpa says this beautifully, which is that it's about interconnectedness actually, and you can only interconnect when you have a strong sense of self. So nobody is asking for this disillusion of self or this selfless sacrifice, all these things that we feel, oh ये तो मतलब मैं नहीं कर सकती या कभी कर सकती हूँ or whatever, and even when we do it then we feel very good and like respectable and such martyrs that we did something good for someone today. That's not actually what it is. It's actually something for me only, right? So I think that's what it means, that actually only when we have strong selves to connect with will we be able to interconnect, because it's actually our differences and the diversity, that is what leads to real compassion. Because if everyone is going to be like me or look like me or talk like me or whatever, then kya compassion? I don't have to do much work, right? And again, this is something you learn in life, and something I learned at Khabar Lahariya very, very much in a practical way, of working with diverse people. And only then will you truly be able to find that interconnectedness, because otherwise there's nothing to connect.
Yeah, and to reach out to that person. There's a nice thing in it also, no? If there are two people talking about the same thing, then one of them is unnecessary. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
If two
two people agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary.
So when compassion is an exercise in that. But I think I would like to end at least our conversation by asking you, the book has some amazing, in the how section, some amazing exercises for you to just practice compassion every day. Some of them are just visualization, some of them are lovely, things to just sort of try out with your loved ones, try out with other people who, to not just to develop your own, strengthen your own sense of compassion, but also like to develop theirs, right? So to sort of teach people also. And but I would like to ask you, which is your favorite of all of those? Like, what is it one thing that you would want to sort of you resort to, or you get back to whenever you tell yourself that, okay, like, this is compassion for me, or as a practice?
I've just started some meditation, so for me that is helpful. Just because it gets me in that mind space of kind of awareness and disconnecting from the immediate stuff that seems like burning or whatever actually is not, or whatever. So anyway, that I think that for me. And it's been a journey again because we all feel like we have to excel at something. I'm going to crush meditation as well, right? And that is not the point as I'm learning. So I think for me, I'll say that although I love a lot of the practices and I have tried them, I think one that I feel is that I feel are very easy to do. One is just it's called the supply chain of gratitude in the book. And Kailash was just talking, and I thought of it as, actually this is a practice. So I took his permission to include it as a practice, which is that, when you just think of the thing that you enjoy, it could be a book, reading a book, it could be having coffee, it could be anything, just a simple basic creature comfort, which we all take for granted. And to just think of the supply chain that has made it possible for that coffee to be in front of you, and then just, meditate on that a little bit, and maybe research it beforehand so you don't miss any links, and to just think of that, and then how that makes you feel. The fact that you're able to enjoy this book with your coffee, who all have made that responsible, just that. For me, this became very real in this sense of, and this links to the individualism actually, because that individualism has that ahankar, right? It's the thing of my achievements and my books and my children and all of that. You can keep going on with the my. But actually recognizing that there's never a my, right? Like if I have been able to write these books, it's because of several people, several circumstances, starting with your parents and how enabling they made the circumstances, and then goes on, list kind of goes on actually. So it's never just your achievement anyway. Your name is on the book, but you should know this. So I think that the supply chain of gratitude is one. And the other one is the ICU hack, which is my personal favorite, which is very simple because it's really that jo bachpan mein khelte the na, who's going to blink first, that game. And it's just that, just looking into someone's eyes, because we do not do that anymore either. Or maybe we never did it, I don't know. But again, because it's just presence and attention. And the minute you do it, even for 2 minutes, I guarantee you, and I have tried this, there is something about the humanity that gets reflected in you, and you can feel that person's everything, especially that person's suffering. Wo to sabse pehle, I think, we are wired to feel it. And then once you feel it, of course you want to do something about it, whatever it is, if you can. So I think that the ICU hack is a personal
I really
favorite.
like that as well. But for the performance part of the Maria Abramovich thing.
There's a famous performance artist who does it as a performance
Yeah,
piece.
it's very, very powerful. It just seems like a very simple thing, but it's extremely powerful if you do it intentionally.
Yeah, and I would actually suggest to do it with that difficult person. We all have difficult people in our lives, and it's actually, so this is also because this has been my journey, actually nobody is difficult. It's not the person who is difficult, and if the person is difficult, you are also making it difficult. So that is also something to recognize and acknowledge. Again, it's self-compassion actually, because wohi hota hai na, if you have to deal with that difficult person, you avoid it, you ignore it, you do everything you can to not talk to that person, whatever it is, right? So actually apni bhi suffering badha hi rahe ho, right? So I feel that even recognizing that person is not difficult, it's just that I have also not done something that can make this less difficult. And so that ICU hack, I think, really works with the difficult people in your life. I would suggest trying it.
वो difficult person आके आप उसको भी तो देखना चाहिए ना, वो नहीं देखेगा.
Try it. Try it as the game who will blink first.
कभी कभी ऐसे मोमेंट्स एकदम से आ जाते हैं.
देखेगा कहाँ difficult है वो.
थोड़े कम डिफिकल्ट से स्टार्ट करते I think we'll open the floor to questions now. I think everybody would have some.
I want to say मैं ये हिंदी में इसलिए बोल रही हूँ कि जो मैं बोलना चाह रही हूँ उसका मज़ा हिंदी में ही है. आपकी 10 साल की बेटी तब थी, है ना, आपने उसका जिक्र करा. उसके साथ ही आपने ये भी बताया कि बच्चों को कुछ सिखाना करना थोड़ा मुश्किल होता है. अब मैं आपको एक कहानी बताती हूँ. एक गांव था, उसमें अब गांव में तो गोल वोल सब वैसे एक अगर इमेजिन करें तो उसी तरह की चीज़ें होती हैं. तो एक पति पत्नी के एक बेटा था, उसको गुड़ खाने का इतना शौक था, वो लगातार गुड़ खाता, खाना नहीं खाता. मेरा पेट भर गया. उन्होंने बहुत मना किया, वो नहीं माना. तो वहाँ पे एक सन्यासी जी आए, वो लोगों को बताते थे, प्रवचन करते थे. तो किसी ने कहा कि अपने बच्चों को उनके पास ले जाओ, वो बताएंगे ना, तुम्हारे कहने का असर नहीं होगा, उनके कहने का असर होगा. तो वो ले गए. तो उन्होंने सन्यासी जी से अपनी समस्या रखी. उन्होंने कहा आप 15 दिन बाद आइएगा. पता नहीं इसमें क्या बात है, गुड़ ना खाओ कह दो अभी इसे, अभी 15 दिन तक. तो वो चले गए. फिर उससे बोले, जिसने कहा था, बोले पता नहीं स्वामी जी ने ऐसा क्यों कहा 15 दिन के बाद आओ. एक गुड़ खाने को मना कर देते, अब दोबारा इतनी दूर जाना पड़ेगा, समझ नहीं आया. 15 दिन तक कि और भी गुड़ खा लेगा. तो खैर वो 15 दिन के बाद. तो सन्यासी जी ने उसकी अब आँखों से आँखों की बात देखी, उसकी तरफ देखा, देखते रहे. वो भी देखने लगा. उसने कहा कि ये मेरी तरफ क्यों देखा. तो वो पलक नहीं झपक रहे थे. इसने कहा कि अच्छा ये पलक नहीं झपकते तो गुस्सा है, मैं भी करता हूँ. वो भी पलक नहीं झपका. और थोड़ी देर के बाद उन्होंने कहा बेटा गुड़ अच्छा नहीं होता, थोड़ा खाओ, इतना नहीं खाते, नुकसान करता है. बस वो घर आ गए. उसके बाद से वो बच्चा सुधर गया. तो जो आपने कहा, इसमें एक जो कंपैशनेट वर्ड है वो वर्ड नहीं है, वो पूरा उपन्यास है. क्योंकि उसमें आप बहुत कुछ शामिल कर लेते हैं. अब ये भी उसी में शामिल है, जो प्रैक्टिस है, जो उनका सोच है, जो. तो इस तरह से अगर हम सोचें तो कंपैशनेट को डिफाइन करना बड़ा मुश्किल है.
Thank you, Shweta.
I was listening to this whole journey of yours as a vulnerable subject and author, trying to pursue this whole notion of, or understand this whole notion of compassion. And it's a very, thank you for, to begin with, for this nice exposure of whatever your concepts were. Now my issue with what you said is that you cannot completely ignore an ideological understanding of compassion as well. It cannot be only experiential. And the reason why I'm saying this is some religion like Buddhism, Christianity, I mean I was raised a Christian, there is a very definitive understanding of what compassion is. And that compassion is not necessarily located in your individual domesticity, your child, your husband. It's always thrown out to a larger canvas. And that is very important, from my understanding. And you're right, your journey is, we have to start with ourselves first. But at no point did I get the feeling it is hitting a larger canvas. I've not read the book, so I'm not in any position to make that comment, but just observation. I always feel compassion should reach a much larger canvas than ourselves. Because some of us may be in a bad situation or maybe not. And gratitude, all that is there. But compassion is something more than that. I was just thinking about the Toronto crash. You heard about it?
Yes.
And this guy was interviewed. And he said, suddenly we became like a family, all of us. And we were all reaching out to each other. Now that is something which is not particularly to do with that we're helping out each other.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, something larger.
Yeah.
So that's what many religions preach. Be it Karuna, be it whatever. We get that feeling that there has to be, I'm not saying you have to make it religious, but certainly a certain amount of spirituality should, rather than the material lived experience of life works. There's more than that. We can't dismiss that. And the feeling you said of gratitude, sometimes we feel good when we help each other. There's a feeling of self-gratification, I think should be more than that. You should just feel empowered, enriched, or maybe not even think about it till much later. And then you realize, oh my God, I'm so glad. The person comes and tells you or whoever's been that kind, that look, thank you for helping me. And then you say, oh, of course, it was so natural. But that's the kind of impact I'm saying, something larger.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I don't know if this is very radical to say, but I think religion also is about daily practice, right? And that is why it's great that it's in religion, because you then do it because it's part of your daily practice. And you're absolutely right, the religions you mentioned and more have that as a thing, yeah. There is of course some ideological in the book which might interest you, but the second part of what you said, right, self-gratification is not what I meant. I mean, if that came across as that. And actually, you're right that you don't even think about it. And that is all that I would suggest, to think about it. Simply because it will make you do it again. Because sometimes when you practice that compassion and you felt what you felt, but because you didn't think about it, you moved on, you will not recognize it as that moment of when you did practice compassion and what it felt to you, right? So I think that is what I meant by that. Because more than self-gratification, it's your heart expanding, like I said, right? Like that is the problem, that our heart, we impose these limitations on ourselves. So yeah.
Talking about being kind to oneself, especially our generation, women, we were always taught to give, not to be kind to ourselves.
Yes.
Over the years, one learnt to be kind to oneself. It was my own mother who had always given. Couldn't understand that. She told me, "Aapne to bahut bolna shuru kar diya." I said, "Mom, I'm doing it for myself. I'm enjoying it." And guess who told me to do that? My own son. He says, "Mom, what are you doing for yourself? What do you like?" Because that's the way I had brought him up. We are bringing up our children differently, but that's not how we were brought up. And we actually felt guilty if we were kind to ourselves. We just weren't capable of doing that. And it was not taken kindly at all by anybody. Mostly the men. They were quite, our family doctor had told me, you want to be a doormat, you'll be treated like a doormat. And these things kind of stay, in your mind. And talking about compassion, how do you explain a non-veg? I'm a non-veg and I consider myself pretty compassionate, but I'm a non-veg. How does that happen? I mean, I don't know how to explain that. I don't even want to think about it, you know what I mean?
Or in general.
Beg your pardon?
To explain it to a vegetarian.
Yeah, I kind of put blinkers on over there. I can't even kill a cockroach. My friend tells me, when she stamps on a cockroach, I say, "How can you do that?" She says, "Coming from a non-veg, I can't do it. I can't even, I shoo the spider away, or I shoo the ant away, and I shoo the cockroach away. I can't stamp on it, But I'm a non-veg.
होने का मतलब ये थोड़ी सा खुद ही मुर्गे को मारेंगे उसको खाएंगे एक्चुअली यहाँ मैं एक सेंटेंस कहना चाहती हूँ नॉन वेज वो कह रहे हैं कि हम एनिमल्स को कह रहे वेजिटेशन में भी तो जान होती है तो फिर वो भी तो एक तरह की मारना ही हुआ ना बिकॉज वो तो ग्रो करते हैं जैसे हम ग्रो करते हैं ऐसे वेजिटेशन ग्रो करता है तो हम उनको भी तो ग्रो करने की जगह तोड़ के खा रहे हैं तो ये कहना कि नॉन वेज है ये सब गलत है स्वामी परमहंस जो थे ना उन्होंने ये कहा था खाना आपको जो खाना है खाइए पर विचारों से आप पवित्र रहिए वो है असली
And I think what I was just pointing to was the awareness part of it. And I think in the book there's also this interesting thing about how when it goes from the personal to the universal is when you really understand what it means, right? So, मतलब वो तो Indian aesthetics में भी है जो साधारणीकरण बोलते हैं कि जब आप कोई परफॉर्मेंस देखते हो बिकॉज आई एम परफॉर्मर आई विल टॉक अबाउट इट लाइक दैट तो जब आप उसका दुख देखते हो कैरेक्टर का तो आपको लगता है कि हाँ मेरा दुख और ये मेरा सॉरो विद स्मॉल एस और उसका सॉरो विद बिग एस सेम है सो देन यू फील अ रिलीज एंड यू रियली नो हाउ टू टेक इट होम सो माई थिंग वॉज ऑल्सो द अवेयरनेस पार्ट ऑफ इट विच यू हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट इन द बुक but yeah, you can answer the.
I don't know. I haven't thought about it actually. So I would love. It would be a great discussion.
I've got my school friend.
The non-veg.
She's always there. She's my conscience every now and then.
And
You're vegetarian.
But I think there also it's that awareness part of it, I would say. I mean, I
don't want to be aware of it.
If you're aware, you can own up to it. And then you can own up to the contradiction also. कि हाँ मैं कॉकरोच को नहीं मार सकती मगर मैं चिकन
विचार आपके अच्छे होने चाहिए, which is a good thing. But उस जानवर को समझाओ ना कि हमारे विचार क्या हैं. इसको हमने मारा खाया, उसको समझा. Cannibal हम कहते हैं, how can they eat another human being? We are eating animals and birds and everything that creeps and crawls and flies.
But we are all in the journey of it. I think that's also what the book is saying. कि हम मतलब एकदम यहाँ से वहाँ या तो उधर है या इधर है ऐसा तो है नहीं. We are all in that continuum. So as long as we know where we are and where
you're thinking about it.
you're thinking about it. You are acknowledging the paradox. I think that is a great step in that journey of compassion.
मगर यहाँ मारने की भी एक डेफिनेशन होती है. छोटेपन में मेरी बच्चियों की जुएं हो जाती थी अपने कहीं से ले आती थी आया भया से, तो मैं उनको लेके और ऐसे करके यूज्ड टू डू दैट तक से आवाज आती थी, बड़ा सेटिस्फेक्शन मिलता था. मेरी मदर ने सास कहने की आप तो जुओं को मारती है, मारना तो बहुत बुरी बात है. मैंने तो फिर इसका क्या करूँ, कभी चढ़ जाएंगी, उन्होंने कटोरी के पानी में डाल दो. दैट मरना are killing in any way, the method is
halal and chatka.
I think a thing, right, about how two things can be true at the same time. So it also, like, increasingly as I grow older, feels so authentic, like so true. Like, what am I compassionate 24/7, 365? Like, I used to think about this when I wrote Mom Speak, and you know, that's the book that tackles patriarchy head on a bit to your question about how women. But you know, so for me that it was the question there was a feminist question. Am I a feminist 24/7, 365 days of the year? And then, you know, that's a different journey, but or maybe not. But the fact that there's no handbook for me to say कि आज कैसे feminist होना है, मतलब मैं इस situation में हूँ, तो similarly I feel like आज कैसे compassionate होना है, वो handbook भी हम ही बना रहे हैं. Like it's really like some, to me this, you know, your own personal DIY kind of life hack. So it will be living, breathing, full of contradictions, and that's how it will grow, you know. So yeah.
actually
It's wonderful to have a role model also, like Dalai Lama, and he came from a background of so much persecution and horror, and then how he has preached compassion all over the world and felt it. And it's just, the irony is so overwhelming. From the talk I was thinking of his background and Tibet and how
Except he doesn't see it as ironic. So that's, I think, the true kind of, yeah. He sees it as that journey.
Nelson Mandela also. He had very, so as president, he said no hatred towards the whites.
After all those years
After all that he went through.
I went to Robben Island. My God, what persecution.
पर मुझे एक बार ही मौका मिला था दलाई लामा से हाथ मिलाने का, और उस वक्त मुझे ऐसा लगा कि जैसे मेरे अंदर इतनी शांति भर गई है, सारी नेगेटिविटीज खत्म हो गई है. और उन्होंने 1 मिनट तक मेरा हाथ पकड़े रहा था. सब देख रहे थे कि रास्ते से कोई लेक्चर सुनने गए थे, तो बीच की यहाँ से निकले, तब मैंने हाथ पकड़ा. इट्स आई डोंट नो, आई कांट डिस्क्राइब दैट टू यू. एक्चुअली मैं आपसे एक सवाल एक्सपेक्ट कर रही थी. जब मैंने कहानी सुनाई, आपने ये नहीं पूछा कि 15 दिन क्यों वेट करा. आपने ये क्यों नहीं पूछा? अब आप पूछिए तो मैं बताती हूँ. इसलिए उन्होंने कहा, उस आदमी ने पूछा कि स्वामी जी आपने फिर इस बात को कहने के लिए 15 दिन क्यों लगाए? तो उन्होंने कहा बेटा मैं गुड़ खाता था, तो मैंने जब गुड़ छोड़ा तब मैंने ये बात आपको So I can say that I was just, I mean, sorry, but I was thinking that you will ask this since.
Story was so lovely, I got lost in it. Questions बाद में आते हैं.
I was so irritable today with my staff, and I realized it was because I was irritated with myself. So I kind of forgave myself for all my untidiness and mess and disorganization. And the minute I did that, I sat down with a cup of tea, then I was able to talk to him in a very compassionate manner. because he was being very unreasonable about something. But how to explain it to him? I was just feeling angry. And then when I was trying to tidy up and not managing, then I forgave myself. I said everybody has flaws, so this is my flaw. And let me have a cup of tea. Then it naturally came about that I was able to connect.
So you practiced self-compassion just this morning?
Yes. And I do.
चाय में होता है ना तो उसको कहते हैं अच्छा टैनिन ना
Chai usually serves me.
And I teach handicap for more than 35 years. And whenever the child misbehaves, I think what is happening with that child in their lives. कुछ तो हुआ होगा. Then I asked him, मम्मी के साथ झगड़ा हुआ था इससे.
Thank you. I think what Kamiji you said, and that's actually true for not just women, but I think the members of this club, the senior citizens, because everyone has been taught, women in a different way, men in a different way, and that is to be, compassion is always outward. And I think unless we start practicing it and understanding self-compassion, and I keep saying this, I keep telling my mother also, that when you board an aircraft, they first say put your oxygen mask and then put the child. So we have to shift our own thought process to that. And also when you were talking about the plane accident that we just had, how people came together, this is a basic human instinct. But what we saw in Corona, which was global, it connected everyone globally. It's a normal human instinct. But the competitive world, the survival, we are conditioned, and we are still very lucky. I always say, I think all of us who were born in the 50s, 60s, even 70s, some extent maybe 80, we are very lucky that we've kind of been brought up in this atmosphere that we have it in our DNA. But the more virtual the world is going, simple things like sharing in joint family, adjusting, compromising, all these things are gone. Because of all this. First it started with nuclear families, and now with this virtual world, it's a very scary thing. And that is why I think, if I remember correctly, what I think His Holiness has also said, that we need a revolution. And hence these little exercises is something that we need to, of course, practice. And I think it's also our responsibility to imbibe it. So thank you for opening. And
can I just add on the competition thing, and Janay, with your permission, because he just mentioned this and I thought it was a great way to say it, that because it's a competitive world and we're all kind of surviving and all of that, so we feel that compassion is at odds with that. And actually, especially now, the world we're in, he just shared that what he tells his son is that, actually compassion is what will give you the edge in this competition. So I feel that that's a great way to actually see it, and it's absolutely true. Even you're already seeing it in colleges, they're screening you for emotional quotient and those things. It's already happening. So, that's how change happens. So I just wanted to add to the
because we were, for us, compassion, like what His Holiness also said, doing. Karuna coming from Karuna, it was the way it was. And also, most religions, of course, endorse that, be it any religion, every religion, definitely. And you see in some religions it's being very, even practiced. But so I think that's our responsibility also to kind of pass it on. So thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
I'd request Sujayaji to please.
Don't eat the plants.
Thank you. Please do join us for lunch, and also both Dr. Anshika Pathak, Dr. Abhishek Mishra are here if you want questions answered to do with.
Yeah, I just told him, when he says it straight, I went like that, and he said, don't get stiff, and I went like that.
I think according to the instructions, we should stand up and do.
मैं यहाँ जूम क्लोज माइनस करूँगा ना
Thank you so much.